So how does one single gunshot in a pretty obscure corner of Europe manage to plunge the entire planet into the most brutal war in human history? Well, it wasn't just one thing. It was a cascade, a terrifying domino effect of alliances, ambitions, and one really, really bad day. Okay, let's get into it.
You know, it's kind of wild to think about, but in 1914, the world felt like it was at the absolute height of civilization. We had amazing new technology, incredible art and culture, fantastic fashion, and yet, just beneath that shiny surface, there was this simmering tension that was about to boil over in the most catastrophic way imaginable.
And here's the thing you gotta understand. This wasn't a peaceful world that was suddenly shocked by violence. Not at all. Europe was basically a powder keg, just waiting for a spark. Everybody knew a big war was probably coming. It was really just a question of when and where.
Okay, so let's break this down. It was a total mess of competing interests. You had France, still absolutely furious about losing territory to Germany decades earlier. Then you had Germany, this new, powerful, and super ambitious country that wanted its own global empire and was building a massive navy to prove it. Well, guess who that made nervous? Great Britain, right? The undisputed rulers of the sea. On top of all that, huge old empires like Austria-Hungary were basically crumbling from the inside out, with all these different ethnic groups demanding their own countries. And the cherry on top? Military technology had just taken a terrifying leap forward.
And that spark I mentioned, the one that lit the whole fuse, it came on June 28, 1914, in the city of Sarajevo. This is where a series of coincidences, so unbelievable they almost sound made up, would change the course of history forever.
I mean, you just can't make this stuff up. The heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, is driving through Sarajevo in an open-top car. Oh, and the exact route? Yeah, they published it in the morning newspaper. So a team of assassins is waiting. The first guy tries to throw a bomb, but it bounces off the car and injures some officers instead. A total failure. He'd think, okay, time to get the Archduke out of there, right? Nope. He insists on going to the hospital to visit his injured men. But then, his driver takes a wrong turn, and by the most insane stroke of bad luck, the car stalls right in front of one of the other assassins who had already given up and was just grabbing a sandwich. The guy can't believe his eyes. He just walks up to the car and fires the shot that kicks off the First World War.
So yeah, as you can imagine, Austria-Hungary is beyond furious. They are absolutely convinced that the Serbian government was behind the whole plot. And to be fair, they might not have been totally wrong about that. They see this as the perfect excuse to finally crush their annoying neighbor, Serbia, once and for all.
And here is the absolutely crucial point. This whole thing should have been a small regional conflict, but Europe was caught in this ridiculously complicated web of alliances, secret pacts, and promises. It was like a perfectly set up line of dominoes, and pushing just one meant they were all about to fall.
And this is where the chain reaction just goes into overdrive. Austria-Hungary, with Germany basically giving them a blank check of support, hands Serbia an ultimatum that's impossible to accept. Serbia naturally refuses, so Austria-Hungary declares war. In response, Russia, which sees itself as the big protector of Serbia, starts mobilizing its gigantic army. Germany sees that as a direct threat, so it declares war on Russia. Well, that triggers France's alliance with Russia, and boom, suddenly France is at war with Germany too. We're talking about a matter of days here, and the entire continent is on fire.
But what about Great Britain? Where are they in all this? Well, France and Britain had a kind of friendly understanding, but it wasn't a formal ironclad military alliance. So when France asks for backup, Britain is hesitant. They really preferred to stay out of Europe's drama. It was going to take something pretty big to drag them into the fight.
And that something big was just around the corner. See, Germany knew it couldn't survive a long war fighting France in the west and Russia in the east at the same time. So they came up with this incredibly bold, high-risk plan they were sure would win the war in a matter of weeks.
The thinking behind this plan, the Schlieffen plan, was pretty straightforward. Russia was enormous, but it was also kind of clumsy and backward. It would take them ages to get their whole army ready for war. So Germany's idea was, let's throw almost our entire military at France, knock them out of the war with one lightning-fast punch, and then pivot all those troops east to deal with the slow-moving Russians. Victory would be quick, and everyone would be home before they knew it. But there was one massive, glaring problem. France had built this line of super strong forts along its border with Germany. Attacking them directly would be a bloody nightmare. So the German solution? Simple. Just go around them. And that meant marching about 750,000 soldiers straight through the small, neutral country of Belgium.
Germany just assumed Belgium would step aside and let them pass. Big mistake. The Belgians actually fought back, and fought hard, slowing down the German invasion. But more importantly, Germany's invasion of a neutral country, a country whose neutrality Britain had personally guaranteed, was the final straw. Britain declared war on Germany. All the dominoes had now officially fallen.
So that lightning war Germany had planned for? Yeah, it never happened. Not even close. Instead, something totally new and unbelievably horrifying took its place. The armies stalled, the war of movement ground to a complete halt, and it was replaced by a brutal, grinding stalemate.
And this right here perfectly explains the core tragedy of the war. The generals were all fighting with 19th century tactics. I'm not kidding. The French army marched into battle wearing bright blue coats and red trousers, walking slowly in neat columns. They were marching straight into the jaws of 20th century technology. Machine guns that could fire hundreds of rounds a minute and heavy artillery that could obliterate entire landscapes. The mismatch was absolutely catastrophic.
Despite all the delays, the German army actually did push deep into France. They got so close to Paris, they could practically see the Eiffel Tower. For a moment, it looked like their crazy plan might actually work. But the German troops were completely exhausted, and they pushed too hard, opening up a critical gap between two of their armies. The French commander saw his one chance and ordered a massive, desperate counterattack.
The German armies were forced to retreat, and to stop the Allied counterattack, they dug in. They started digging defensive trenches. The Allies, facing them, did the exact same thing. Then, both sides began what they called the race to the sea, each one trying to outflank the other until they literally ran out of land at the coast. What they were left with was an unbroken line of trenches stretching all the way from Switzerland to the English Channel. The Western Front was born.
And life in those trenches, it was a living nightmare. Just try to imagine constant artillery fire that could literally drive men insane from what they called shell shock. To attack, soldiers had to climb out and cross a hellscape of mud, barbed wire, and craters, all while machine guns just mowed them down in waves. They lived alongside rats, disease, and the bodies of their own friends. It's almost impossible for us to even comprehend the conditions they had to endure.
So the war that everyone thought would be over by Christmas had become a static, industrial meat grinder on a scale nobody had ever imagined. Millions of men were now trapped in this horrific new kind of warfare with no end in sight. The world had stumbled into a complete catastrophe, and the question on everybody's mind was, what on earth happens next?